click, click. Hello everyone, this is Taco from Bigheadtaco.com, and I'm here to talk about the new X-Pro 2, and I have the 35 f2.WR on here, so it matches up very well. But I am here to compare. As you can see, I have a plethora of different cameras on here, mostly Fujifilm, but some that are not. And I'm going to compare these because, you kind of want to know where a camera sits within its own range of its own series, but as well as other cameras. And so I'm not going to have every camera in the world here, but at least the ones that I felt will be a great way to compare. So if you want to know more about the new features of the X-Pro 2, I have another video that I'll put a link somewhere, or maybe not, maybe in the description. You can watch that one first, and then you can see how I compare this camera to the other cameras. And so the first obvious choice is obviously the original X-Pro 1. Now, the Pro designation at that time, clearly this was meant to be their flagship camera. And there's a lot, if you look at it, they actually look identical. If you weren't looking carefully, other than the back, from the front, it looks almost the same. And that's actually a good thing. I have not tested this camera in a while, so it was a little bit odd getting it. And then sort of, this nostalgic feel. It came out in 2012, it was announced in 2012. So, I haven't played with this in a few years. So, in the hand, definitely the X-Pro 2, the grip is larger and the back feels more ergonomic. And as you can see, if you look at the back of the X-Pro 1 here, I've always hated the buttons on the far left, because especially if there's any shooting features, meaning on the X-Pro 1, you can see that they have drive mode and autofocus mode on the far left. Now, I don't care if the play mode and the trash mode while you're viewing is on the left side, but if you're shooting and you have to press a button on the left side, I don't like that. Everything should be accessible as you're shooting like this. Your other hand is already on the lens and you're doing other things. So be able to have to go like this, I'm not a big fan of that. So it's great that the X-Pro 2 moved everything over to the right. Now, the other Fujifilm X series cameras did so, but that's to accommodate the articulating screen. But the Fuji's listening to their customers as well as the reviewers wanting everything to the right. And so that's definitely a big change. I'm not going to go over in terms of the internal specs because, again, my other video goes over it. But, everything is faster, zippier, quicker with the X-Pro 2. One of the things I've noticed, battery, it's the same battery, right? X-Pro and X-Pro 2, no big deal. But one of the things you'll notice is the X-Pro 1, like many cameras, it put the battery and the memory card in the same slot. Doesn't seem like a very pro feature, but the new X-Pro 2 has a battery on the bottom, okay? It has the slot on the side for the memory card, which is more professional, and as well, it's a dual slot, and so that is great for pros who want to back up a backup card, as well as using it in sequence or using it to what else is it? Yeah, anyways, there's 3 different features. Watch my other video. You'll see how you can use it, but that's actually a really good feature on the new X-Pro 2. And if you notice, look at the bottom. What do you see? What do you see there? Well, the tripod thread has moved. On the X-Pro 1, it's a little bit off-center. And even if you're not using any kind of a stitching style, it's so close to the battery and memory compartment that if you actually have a tripod plate on there, you have to remove the plate to get your battery memory card out, and that's not great for working professional. This one, not only is it centered, which to me is a pro feature, is that you can access the battery very easily even with a plate, and I've tested it. As well, mounted, you can access your memory cards on the side as well on the tripod. So that's actually a great feature. Another upgrade is the weather sealing on this, and that's definitely a great feature. So those are the major differences. The switching here between optical and electronic viewfinder mode is almost in the exact same spot, which to me is not, it feels a little bit odd where it is. I get used to it, but it just seems a little bit I'll talk about it when I talk about the X100. So it seems like it's not in the right spot. But other than that, if you have the X-Pro 1, you'll feel very much at home with the X-Pro 2. The next camera to compare with, and it seems like an unusual comparison, but I will do it, is with the X100T. Now, amongst us Fujifilm, I'm a reviewer, but amongst those that have bought into the Fujifilm ecosystem, it seems like the X100T is a favorite. Now, I write for FujiLove online magazine, and it seems like a lot of the X-photographers that are there, there's maybe too many articles on X100T. And that's because there isn't too much. This is a fantastic camera. As I mentioned before, as I was choosing between which one of these cameras should be my personal camera, I ended up going with the Ricoh GR because of its size, because I often carry 2 or 3 other review cameras, and I just couldn't lug a camera. Even this is still kind of small, but still too big for me. But I really love this camera. One of the things I complained about it is the adapter. Now, this makes the 35mm equivalent view on this, so it's a 23mm lens built in. You have to add this TCL teleconverter lens on here to make it to a 50mm equivalent. So look how big and bulky that is. Now, it makes it heavier. I've done a weight comparison. It ends up being, I'm cheating a little bit because I do have the grip on here, but with the grip, because this grip is a little bit more substantial than the X Pro 2 grip, but to make it functional for me, especially with this, with the teleconverter lens, this is actually heavier than the X Pro 2. So if you like shooting 50mm equivalent with the X100T and this teleconverter, compared to the X Pro 2 with a 35mm lens, and this is also a 50mm equivalent and weather sealed. I mean, if you're talking about just in terms of weight, this is actually going to be lighter than the X100T. And on top of that, everything else about it is better. The AF is faster, better processor, more megapixels, better EVF, better optical viewfinder, better lens, because this teleconverter is basically just magnifying the existing lens. It's not a true 50mm in terms of, it wasn't designed to be a 50mm equivalent, where this 35 f2 was designed to be that. And I've tested, so this is actually it works out to about a 35 f2 APS-C, and this is a 35 f2. There's no comparison in terms of image quality. This will destroy the X100T with the teleconverter. And so that's why I'm comparing these two, because they both have the optical and electronic viewfinder, which is one of the reasons why a lot of guys like shooting with the X100T. Well, everything about this is going to be better. And I think this actually points forward to a new X100, maybe it'll be called the X200 or maybe the X100P, designating professional, and it will have the same sensor, it'll have the same EVF, OVF, it'll have the same X-Trans Pro processor in here, so that it will basically be a mini version. And I hope that Fujifilm will reconsider the size of this, because if you're shooting optical viewfinder mode, this encroaches upon the viewfinder, the optical viewfinder. Almost a quarter of the viewfinder is taken up by this. It's so much in the way. And with the 35 f2, you can't even see it in optical viewfinder mode. Just a little bit of the lens hood, and other than that, you can't see it shooting with the 35mm f2 lens. And so that's why I'm comparing these two. I mentioned this, I brought this flash with me because people know I like shooting with this as a fill flash for street. One of the things that the X100T will have over the X Pro is that the X Pro 2 has a 1/250th of a second flash sync. This goes up to 1/2000. So this flash for street photography, daylight, this will still be better than shooting the X Pro 2. So that's one feature because of the built-in leaf shutter that's built into the lens. But speaking about this this flash, as you can see, the left side here is empty, meaning there's nothing to the left of the shoe. And that's an important thing, because now let's look at the XT1. And this is probably the most natural comparison. You probably see tons of videos and articles comparing these two in terms of which can autofocus better, which can do this better and faster. I don't care about that stuff. Other people do care, and if you do, that's great. To me, it's more about shooting style and feel. Yes, there's a huge difference now in terms of the processor as well as the sensor. You're going from 16 megapixel to 24, and I've pixel peeped. This is a pre-production, so I'm not really supposed to show you a pixel peep version of comparing the two, but I'm telling you, this is an amazing sensor, amazing images, great noise control, great for portraiture in people's faces. And so you look at these two. One of the things I had problem with the XT1 was that when you put the flash here, guess what happens? You block this left knob here. You can't even see what ISO you're at. And so that's one of the things I didn't like using on the XT1, or the X Pro 2 and the X100T and any of the X100s. You know, there's nothing on this side. So to me, aesthetically, it looks nicer. And there's a little rubber stop on the end of the lens to keep it balanced on here. So it's actually been designed for the X100 and the X Pro. It fits nicer on the camera here. But as well, aesthetically, it looks great. And so that's one of the negatives. Now, the XT1 does have an articulating screen. I think that's one thing that a lot of people weren't happy about. I wouldn't have minded if the X Pro 2 had it, but I am not that upset, because to me, the main reason why you shoot this is because of the hybrid viewfinder. And as well, this is the flagship body. So this has the articulating screen. This one does not. If that makes a big difference to you, then, you know, XT1 is still a great choice. And again, you can look on the bottom. The tripod collar is not centered on the XT1. It will get in the way as you try to take out the battery, but the XT1 does have a battery compartment off to the side, which is great. In terms of EVF, yes, the XT1 EVF is definitely bigger than the I had the cap on here the whole time. It's definitely bigger than the X Pro 2. I don't have all the specs of the refresh rates and blah, 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 but, you know, in low light, definitely the X Pro 2 way better than the XT1 in low light. I mean, this is almost looks horrible. I'm sorry to say, the EVF on the X100T when you compare it with the new flagship X Pro 2. This XT1 does not look horrible in comparison to the X Pro 2, but you can definitely see there is, the magnification is less on this. But in terms of, you know, even indoors here is reasonably lit. You can see a little bit, you know, the refresh is a little bit slower. This is faster and cleaner looking and better resolution. So that is another thing. And as well, the ISO dial on the left, this was kind of a cool thing with the XT1 that everyone got excited about. But as we talked about on the X Pro 2, they've implemented it into the shutter speed dial here. So it actually makes more sense to me, and it's a quicker way of accessing. There are more dial control features because, of course, the drive mode is just underneath the ISO dial on the XT1, which to me, I find I'm always knocking it. I don't know of all you XT1 users, but when I pull it out of my bag, it always seems to get out of the single mode. It's always in continuous or something. And so I hate that this moves. This should lock. But the X Pro 2, the drive mode, let me just see here. I don't access the drive mode. It's actually dedicated up on the 4-way controller. And so there is no physical dial. To me, I mean, it's nice to have it there, but because it slips, you know, I never like that. So I'm happy that the ISO dial is built into here. So that is the very quick comparison between the XT1. Actually, one more quick one is that I've always complained about the button travel and feel of the XT1. And the reason why I actually like the XT10 better, even though this is not weather sealed, the buttons felt much nicer. And even this rear dial actually acts as a button in the front and the back because of its non-weather sealed technology. This one here, you know, it isn't. It's tighter, it's recessed in, the buttons are more flush. So I found that the graphite silver version felt a little bit better than the XT1, the standard version, but it just didn't feel right. The X Pro 2, I didn't get much of a spec sheet when I got it. I assumed it wasn't weather sealed, and now I found out that it is, but the buttons actually feel really good. And so even the button feel and the joystick controller, which really helps with picking autofocus points, as well as it's a push-in feature button. And so you have another button feature, push-in feature here. And as well, the front dial here is it has a push-in feature as well as a dial. And you have an extra button here. So actually, in terms of customizing it, even though there's less dials in the X Pro 2, you can customize it more and you can actually shoot faster with it. So that's in comparison with the XT1. Not much talk with the XT10 other than what would be the advantage is really the compact size. I have this with the 27mm pancake, and this is, I mean, it depends on your size and the type of clothing you're wearing, but this is actually pocketable. And it's an APS-C size sensor, and it still was able to incorporate an articulating screen. And for myself, I've mentioned it before, between the XT1 and the XT10, I actually prefer the XT10 because internally, the sensor and the processor is identical. You're going to get the exact same picture. So it comes down to features. Do you want a heftier, bigger, all-metal body with weather sealing, but less tactile feel, or do you want a more compact, lighter camera that has a better tactile feel, but it's not weather sealed and it doesn't have the same pro build feel? I would go with the compact size. And so comparing these two, I don't think you're choosing one over the other, but it's a completely different ball game. I just brought it out because I have it. An unusual comparison. It's unusual, but it works in my mind, is comparing the X-Pro 2 with the Leica SL. Now, why am I comparing these two? Well, because I had both of them over all of December, and I was able to shoot with both of them. So I'm reviewing both of these at the same time, and I started seeing some similarities. One of it is, it's funny how Leica has been always known as this brand that's kind of stuck on nostalgia, and that, they're keep on, manual focus lenses still. What's up with these guys? Using a optical viewfinder on the M series bodies. They kind of seem backwards. So they come out with this new, I don't want to call it flagship, but it's their new mirrorless camera. And it seems so progressive that there's a lot of love or hate for this camera, and that's actually a good thing that there's such a strong reaction. When a camera comes out and nobody talks about it, you get ignored, right? So even bad press is good press. But both of these are 24 megapixels. The difference is this is full frame, and this camera here, the Fujifilm, is an APS-C. And there's been a lot of battling. Some guys are like, I'm a pro, or I want the best, so I'll never shoot APS-C. It's way too small for me. And I hate that argument. Most people that argue that rarely even need the extra size and pixels that are found on most of these full frame camera bodies. For me, it's people with legacy lenses from the past, from film, that want to maintain that same angle of view, who then, when they go to a crop sensor, you lose that angle of view. So your 16 mil wide angle ends up becoming a 24 mil, and so you lose that. So it's not you lose that quality of that lens of why you bought it. And so I could see why some guys, they buy the Sony A7s and they'll use their legacy lenses from whatever brand and they maintain that. But comparing these two, I can tell you, well, first of all, the build quality in the Leica is amazing. It's crazy. It actually, the X-Pro 2 is built really nice, but when you shoot with this, it actually makes, so I'm shooting with this for let's say half an hour, and then I move over to this actually feels cheap, and it's not cheap. But comparing these two, it makes it feel cheap. The biggest thing was they're both the same megapixels, 24 megapixels, and even though I was told by Fujifilm not to pixel peep, I did on the X-Pro 2, JPEG only, because you can't process the RAW files yet. And I compared it against the Leica JPEGs. Now, I love Leica, and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings over there, but I've done, once I get the production model, I'm going to do a critical test. I've compared these two images, JPEG only, at 3200 ISO and 6400. And if you can believe it, the X-Pro 2 in JPEG, it doesn't out-resolve, but that resolution has to do with what lens you're using as well. This actually controls noise better than the Leica. Now that has to do a lot with how both these brands process their JPEGs and how much they suppress the noise for their JPEGs. And so this is not some kind of definitive test, but I was blown away at how well the X-Pro 2 can control noise, even in JPEGs, doing better than the Leica SL. And so that really blew my mind of how good this lens is, this new 35 f2, but as well as how good the new X-Trans sensor, the 3 version of this 24 megapixel. So I had fun shooting with both. They both have the joystick controller, and so that was also really fun to be able to use. They both have a centered tripod collars here. They both have dual slot memory cards on the right side. So I mean, there's a lot of things that were very similar. EVF on this blows away this EVF because the SL has that new 4 million dot EVF. So when you shoot with this, you almost forget it's an EVF. This one, you don't forget that it's an EVF, but it's very good. And actually, I don't mind shooting with this EVF, even though during the daytime, I do still prefer to shoot with the optical viewfinder. So that's my comparison with the Leica SL. And just as a joke, I just brought out my Ricoh GR. There's no comparison. I love the GR. By the time you're at ISO 800, you start to get funny noise. Shoot at ISO 1600. The only redeeming quality of the GR is actually that it's pocketable. The funny thing is, you know, compared to the X-Pro 1, I think these X-Pro 1 had a 1.23 million pixel rear screen with white pixels, and same with the Ricoh GR. I think it's the same LCD screen that they bought from Sony. So both these actually had, the X-Pro 1 and the Ricoh GR has very, very fine rear LCD screens. And the X-Pro 2 has the 1.6 million rear LCD screen, which blows away any of these LCD screens that I have in front of me here. So that is my quick comparison between all these different cameras, where it lies within its own ecosystem, as well as something like an Leica. Comparing this to a DSLR doesn't make sense because I still think, even though spec for spec, this may beat some of the DSLR cameras, there's a lot about DSLRs that you would want to continue shooting over something like a mirrorless camera, even though this is a professional mirrorless. But if you like shooting primes and you like shooting with an optical viewfinder, at this time, there is no camera out there on the market that will compete with those features. Even the Leica with the optical viewfinder doesn't have a hybrid EVF built in, and those are all only manual focus lenses, where this has autofocus. And this one here, yes, it is a mirrorless, and it's high performing and it's full frame, but it's only electronic. So there's nothing on the market like it except the X-Pro 1. And this is, you know, almost 4 years later, a way better camera. So that's my comparison. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to have a full production model in a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to actually, you'll see me out in the field shooting with these cameras, probably comparing between these two, the XT1, X-Pro 2, and the X100T. And then we will actually see images, close-up images and performance, and see really how well it compares. So that was my very quick comparison with all these cameras and how the X-Pro 2 compares. I had a great time with it. Thank you, Fujifilm Canada, for entrusting me with this pre-production model. I've had it for a month. Great camera. We're going to have more in-depth once Fujifilm sends me a production model. Then we can actually see the images. I'm not going to do too much pixel peeping myself anyways, but it was great to have this to really get a good shooting feel. And I think this is really what people want to know, right? How it compares in terms of ergonomics and you know, specs. You can just look up specs yourself. So thank you so much for watching. Like if you like, as well as me producing similar videos like this. Comment below if you have any comments, as well as any questions. Subscribe and tell your friends about this channel. So thank you so much again for watching, and we will talk to you soon. Click, click.